in that moment, why was I crying? It was almost as if I was mourning the death of something. And like, we hadn't formalized the pivot at that point, but I knew that business was dead. Even if we were still operating and doing stuff, it was dead.
So you have this like time clock on your life, you're running out of money, you have this ship that's massive that's moving one direction, and you have to like rebuild it.
There's a big machine that's already in place and has a ton of momentum, and you're coming in and you're making like a small tweak to a small part of this massive machine.
Remen Okoruwa, co-founder and CEO of Propexo, a data integration platform that helps technology companies seamlessly connect with multiple project management systems. Built his experience through roles at HubSpot, where he led product teams, and McKinsey, where he advised Fortune 500 companies. Known for his ability to bridge complex technical challenges with practical business solutions, Remen brings a unique blend of analytical thinking and creative problem solving to the proptech space. His passion for storytelling and continuous learning have shaped his approach to building innovative solutions in multifamily. How do you feel that your upbringing in your childhood has shaped you in terms of how you define success and what success looks like to you?
I grew up thinking I was gonna
Why was that?
Yeah, like I think deep down I realized I didn't care. I want to be the person in our family who did business really successfully. And I want to be able to point to the fact that it's like, you all said the only way to make it was as a here's proof that that's not true.
Remen, welcome to the show.
I'm so pleased to be here with you, Shiv.
I am stoked. So let's start with some early memories. What's your earliest memory?
Oh boy, this is gonna be real random, but I grew up in Iowa, and I feel like I was at this daycare in like in Des Moines, and there was this memory I had of like reaching out, and then like a ladybug landing on my hand. And then I swear it bit me. Okay. So it's like, so I remember crying out and then like literally crying. And then up until maybe the age of 7 or 8, I was afraid of ladybugs. So it was like this, I had this like random fear of what's arguably like the least threatening insect on the planet.
That's crazy.
But yeah, that's my earliest.
That's awesome. And before this, we were talking a little bit about your family and upbringing. Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, so, I mean, you might wonder, it's like you look at my name, you're like, oh, this is some Nigerian guy. How did you grow up and how do you find yourself growing up in Iowa? So my mom, she's a doctor, pediatrician, and she actually went through medical school and everything over in Nigeria. But when she moved to the US, where I was born, in order to practice medicine, she actually had to redo residency. So she was accepted for a residency program at one hospital. It was in Des Moines. I'm certain she did not know where the state of Iowa was on the map at the time she was accepted, but the entire family, we moved to Des Moines where she completed her residency, and then we moved to another part of the state, Council Bluffs, and that's actually where I lived up through high school.
So my sister's husband's mom also came to the States and I think was a doctor in India, but when they moved, she had to also like redo residency. First of all, doing residency once and medical school once is hard enough. Doing it again is incredible.
Yeah, no, and it's like so cool because a lot of my mom, like a lot of people in that program, like there was a doctor from Iran, a couple of other Nigerians, and it's like these became like aunts and uncles. Like I would refer to all these people as like aunts and uncles, but it was just like these are people who came to the U.S., did residency again before they could go out and do their do medicine.
And what about your dad?
Yeah, so my dad, he actually came to the U.S. like I think in the 70s, did undergrad, got a PhD at Georgia State in finance, and for him, he was doing real estate.
Okay. Does that influence your interest in
Yeah, so it's like slightly, not so much because he was focused on real estate appraisal. So it's like, there's a lot of like residential housing. So like as a kid, I remember like sitting in the backseat of his car and we'd be driving around like our hometown, and he'd be like taking pictures of these various houses and like writing stuff up in reports. And candidly, I thought it was extremely boring. So if anything, my dad's work in real estate delayed my entry into multifamily.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how did your parents meet then?
So they met back in, it's sort of interesting. They met back in Nigeria, must have been like the late 80s. And then I think they met, like they were sort of had been introduced They sort of had a courtship period that was a little bit brief, and I think they were like married within 12 months of meeting each other.
Wow.
Yeah, they moved
Uncommon
fast.
these days.
Yeah, very uncommon these days.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you have any siblings?
I do, yeah. So one older brother, one younger brother. So one of the things you should know about my family is that almost everyone who made it to the US, they sort of came in and they were doing medicine of some stripe. So on my mom's side, her younger brother is a neonatologist, a couple sisters who are nurses, and then like a whole bunch of like dentists that are also sort of in the mix. And within my family, my younger brother is a dentist. My older brother, who didn't end up practicing medicine, is now doing public health work. So it's like everyone in the family, super medically driven. And then for me, I'm just like the business guy.
The business guy.
Over on the side.
So you're a middle child.
I am the middle child.
I
yeah.
am a middle child as well.
Okay. So I got to ask you,
Yeah.
like, I feel that being a middle child meant that I was like always paying attention to, like, I feel like I had to be a bit more attentive and a bit more thoughtful to get stuff I wanted, because sometimes my little brother got it because he was a baby, and then sometimes my older brother got it because it was his right, like he's the oldest. But I feel like I always had to fight a little bit for the stuff I wanted. Did you get that at all?
Yeah. So I was just talking about this. I definitely feel that way, right? Because like the oldest child is setting the stage and the standard, and you know, the parent is still figuring it out. The younger child is just kind of like this like gold piece of gold that everybody looks at. And I think exactly what you said is, I often had to just kind of fend for myself. That's a harsh word. My parents were super loving and caring, but you feel like you have this attitude of like, I can take care of myself.
Yeah.
I don't need anybody to help me.
Yeah.
And like, that's kind of what I felt.
Like that resonates so much. And I feel like sometimes that's come to bite me, because one of the things that I've had to work on is asking for help and like seeking mentorship out. Like, I feel like I had this really strong independent streak where it's like, I love just being able to crack a problem on my own and like figure it out, and then get the praise and the pat on the head for being so quick and being super thoughtful about whatever. But like, as time's gone on and like I keep on expanding and like doing new things that I don't have a ton of experience in, honestly, I don't have the time to like pound my head against the wall. I need to, like, it's become so much more important to actually talk with people who know what they're doing and just like soak all that up from them and just level up that much faster. And I think that like it was something that as a kid, I felt like I wanted to do everything on my own. And now I really try to say like, who's fucking amazing at something and who has something to teach me. And then once I identify them, like try to pick something up.
And business was the forcing function for that?
I think business was honestly, it was the big thing, because like when you launch a company, there are so many aspects of doing a job that are very different when you're running the company. Like doing a job, it's like narrow job description. You can get expertise and build skill in like a very narrow thing. But like when you're launching a company, like I was before I launched Propexo, I was a product manager. I was a great product manager. Post launching Propexo, cool, I got to do product, but I also had to own marketing, and I also had to do like accounts receivable and billing, and I also had to do a little bit of HR, and I also had to coordinate with our legal counsel. And it's like, holy shit, like there are so many moving pieces that I now have to juggle, and I have to be not incompetent at. And I think that like with that, it's just like, hey man, I try to have the growth mentality where, hey, you can always pick up more skills, but I think that you can also shortcut a lot of learnings by talking to people who know what they're doing.
Yeah, Jason Lemkin from SaaStr has this like great phrase of, he says founders are great middlers, right? Like you're basically kind of okay at like a lot of things, but that's kind of what you need in the early days is there's so many functions that need attention. You just have to like hammer out those functions.
Yeah, one of our investors, a guy, Mike Volpe, former CMO of HubSpot, and he had this thing talking about a T-shaped, like when he would hire, he talked about wanting to bring on T-shaped employees. So with the T-shaped employee, they have like a narrow spike in something. So something that they're really, really good at, but then broad enough experience on enough other things. So if you throw them a curveball, they'll be like, hey, like, it's fine. This isn't 100% my job description. I haven't seen this problem before, but I'm generally good at enough things that I can crack it. And I think that like that concept of like a T-shaped employee really translates well to being a founder, where you do want to have something you're really good at that's like when stuff is like not going well, you can say like, well, at least I'm crushing X. But you do need to go have some of that breadth as well.
Totally. And ideally you and your co-founder have opposite
in the complementary,
in the complementary thing. Okay. Interesting. So I guess like one of the things that I'm always curious about is, how do you feel that your upbringing and your childhood has shaped you in terms of how you define success and what success looks like to you?
Really, really great question. And I think that for me, I grew up thinking I was going to be a doctor. When I was in high school, I was volunteering at my mom's hospital. At the same period of time, I would shadow my mom in her clinic. I would shadow other physicians in her clinic. Before I went to college, I'd seen a cesarean section. I'd seen a live birth. I'd seen a hysterectomy. Like, I really had been all over the hospital. And I think that for both myself and my mom, we thought that that was a trajectory. But I think that, one of the things that ended up happening was going to college was eye-opening. I was some Iowa kid who hadn't really seen that much of the world. And a lot of my perception of like what a good life was and what a good career was largely driven by my family, who are absolutely amazing people who've achieved so much. But as I mentioned, like, they're all in the medical profession. So I think that like I almost had these like blinders on, and going to college was the very first time that I was interacting with a really broad set of people who were coming from very different backgrounds, and for whom, yes, medicine was something some people did, but some people, their families had been big in like finance. Some of them had been big in like law or whatever. And then some were like, hey, like, we're super artistic. And my father or grandfather was a big writer or an architect or something like that. And I think that just exposure to people where when they went to school, when they graduated from school, their path wasn't such a linear, like, yes, you do X, you should go pre-med and then you go to med school. It made me question, hey, like, what do I really want to do? And how much of what I think I want to do right now is driven by the fact that I haven't really seen that much of what there is what's possible to do. So like for me, I went in, like, I was a Harvard undergrad. My freshman year, I did the intro pre-med class. After doing the intro pre-med class and meeting the other pre-meds, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to med school. Like, it just...
Why was that?
Yeah, like, I think deep down I realized I didn't care. Like, it was like this deep feeling of, I went in wanting to have a college experience that was about exploration and figuring out what I cared, what I enjoyed, what I wanted to be passionate about, and learn like the memorization. Like, this was sort of like a lightweight organic bio class or organic chemistry class, and there was a lot of memorization. It didn't quite vibe, and I think that I was also sort of projecting this out forward, where it's like a lot of the coursework that I'm going to do is sort of going to look like this. And as I was thinking more about what it meant to become a doctor, there was actually a flip side to my mom giving me so much exposure to hospital life, especially her clinic. What I actually walked away with was that as much as, like, she loved the predictability of clinical care. She got to see the same patients year after year after year. I actually found it boring. And like, there was actually a moment in high school where I realized I started to think my mom's job was boring. But I didn't want to like say that. And I hope my mom doesn't listen to this podcast and she's like, what? But it was this realization that there was something about wanting some dynamism, wanting to continually learn, being in an environment where there was like a lot of change and my day-to-day wasn't as predictable. That was what I realized I wanted from a career. And medicine, as I saw it, wasn't going to deliver that. And what's funny is the thing that sort of set me down the path of business and ultimately entrepreneurship was I was looking. So at Harvard, there's a lot of the consulting firms do a ton of recruiting. So I didn't know what consulting was before I entered. But what ends up happening is I start learning about it from friends, and then I actually watched a practice case interview video on the McKinsey website, and I kid you not, I thought it was the coolest thing ever, because in my, like, what I saw, and this was like a case study about Swatch. So it was like, how do you help this like consumer watch company like sell more watches? I was like, whoa, this is just problem solve. You're being paid to solve an abstract problem that doesn't necessarily have a right answer, but there are like numbers and metrics to consider. And there's like all this context about, well, what markets are you selling into? What are the needs of the consumers in those markets? Like, and the diversity of those kinds of problems, it was like, oh, wow, like there's something about business in particular and all the aspects of building a successful business and then making that business bigger and like larger and more successful that was just like fascinating to me. So that case interview, like I saw that video and I literally then decided I want to become a consultant. And then I ended up going into consulting after I graduated from school. And that was sort of the beginning of my shift.
How did that translate to then becoming a founder? Because building or building on a business, meaning like a business that exists and now you're building on it, is very different than building a business, like the 0 to 1 versus 1 to 10.
Exactly.
How did that transition?
So here's what happens. I graduate from school. I go and join McKinsey as a business analyst or junior consultant. And for the 2 years I was there, I think every client we worked with, I worked on personally, was like a Fortune 100. And just like you're describing, you're optimized. There's a big machine that's already in place and has a ton of momentum, and you're coming in and you're making like a small tweak to a small part of this massive machine. And I gained so much from McKinsey and consulting, like presentation skills, Excel, PowerPoint, all this stuff. But what I realized was I didn't feel like I was creating much impact, because the output of all this work would be a slide deck that we hand over at the end of the project. And then it's really up to the client as to whether they want to implement or not. And I remember having this feeling that it's like the problems, like the attraction to solving a diverse set of problems and building something was still there, but consulting wasn't scratching that itch for me. So I really spent the next few years of my career sort of exploring, hey, like, what is it that I can do that's going to scratch this itch? So it's like my next jumping off point was I did some work in like financial asset management, focused on like VC and private equity. From there, I jumped to working on HubSpot. Actually, HubSpot stint 1 on the sales team, which was fascinating. Because at HubSpot, I realized that, one, I love the company. Like working at a fast growing tech company was the thing I've been looking for all along. I wish someone had told me earlier and I could have just sort of skipped straight to the end there. But like HubSpot, it had the energy, it had the belief, and like you talked with the employees and everyone's like, our mission is helping companies grow better. Like, we are helping small businesses. We have the proof in the case studies. We have the proof when we talk to our customers, and like, you are the reason that we've grown 50 or 100% this year. That energy was infectious, and I wanted like more of that. However, and unfortunately, sales was the wrong team for me. Like, I think that it was a high velocity sale, and it was just like not my cup of tea.
But you were a product at HubSpot.
So afterwards, what ended up happening was I did sales for a year at HubSpot. I then dipped out. I spent another couple of years running a small data analytics consulting firm that was effectively focused on taking data from HubSpot, turning it into custom reports that other people could then take advantage of. And then I returned to HubSpot, this time on the reporting team, because HubSpot was actively trying to level up its reporting. And I had spent like a couple of years literally trying to become a HubSpot reporting expert. And it was really in the second stint at HubSpot as a reporting product manager that like everything clicked. I was at a company I loved. I was in a role that I really thrived in. And I felt like I just got to connect with so many amazing people and like really build product that I'm so proud of, that I got to like sort of like have my stamp on. And that was probably like the most, from a career perspective, my 3 years at HubSpot were like truly a standout moment.
When I think about your career, what's coming to mind is almost like a journey of trying to find product market fit in and of itself.
Exactly. It's like it's like personal life. Like, what's that fit? It's like there's this really cool Venn diagram that I've seen where it's like there's like the thing. I don't know if it's like this things that you're passionate about, the things that make you money, and then the things that
that people want. It's the ikigai, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I think that sounds right. Yeah. And it's like at the center of all that is like what's like vocation or something. But I think that journey, to your point, I sort of knew coming out of school the thing I wanted, but I didn't know where I was going to get it. So I had to sort of keep on doing like things, and each step incrementally got me closer up until sort of I was at a tech company like HubSpot. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. But then at HubSpot on the product team, I was like, okay, I love the energy, I love the role, but now I want to do it for myself. I want to build my own dream and bring that into the world. I don't want to do it for someone else. And that was like ultimately the final step that leads me to Propexo.
Dude, that resonates so much because I think there's this like fantasy that people put a lot of pressure on themselves and society pushes on you as like, you need to like know your passion or you need to have your passion. And what I've come to learn is finding that kind of, the circle that's in the middle of all the concentric circles, the vocation is really like a journey of like excavating and just like, I envision like you're in a mine and you're just like excavating and you're trying to find your path and you don't know what it is, but it's a journey of just kind of going through that thing and taking action, because the more action you take, the more information you have and the more informed you are on what your likes are, your dislikes are, and what your interests are.
Yeah, and like there's a part of this where, as much as I say like it would have been awesome if I had just become a product manager right out of school, I actually think that having explored a number of different paths, once I found the thing I liked, I felt confident that I could commit to it. There wasn't any second thoughts of, but I didn't try X or Y. I was like, no, I've actually done a lot of exploration and this feels qualitatively different. And it's like, I know like deep in my soul that this is what I'm meant to be doing. And I think that like some people have a lot more conviction and they don't need to explore to figure this stuff out. They're like, oh, this is what I love. This is what I do. But I think that for my own personal journey, the exploration is what gives me the confidence to pursue the way that I pursue today.
So you started as pre-med. What did you change to?
Actually, pre-med isn't a major in its own right.
Totally,
So what I ended up doing was I was a biomedical engineering major, and I stuck with biomedical engineering all 4 years. Oh, also, I think that something I should add, the reason I stuck with biomed engineering was that I didn't tell my parents I was not pre-med anymore up until maybe like, I think I got my consulting summer internship, and it was around then where I was like, okay, by the way, I'm not actually planning to go to medical school anymore, and I'm also going to be working at this like consulting firm this summer. So for them, that was a bit of a surprise, as you might imagine. But yeah.
How do they react to that, and how do they process
that? My mom staged a mini intervention for me. And it's like, I just want to say, like, this is the level of immigrant parent where it's like, I want to go into management consulting. And she's like, oh, we need to fix you. So what she did was she sent me down to spend a week with her younger brother, who's a neonatologist, and his wife, who's a dentist. And her thinking was, okay, you've been led astray by all these people in college. What you really need to do is just spend like a week with a family that's all doctors, doctor and dentist. And then you're going to really appreciate why medicine is awesome and why business is a complete waste of your time. So I do this week down there. And then once again, like every time we do this, I shadowed my uncle. I went to his like hospital. I went to my aunt's dental clinic, and I was just like, I saw it all. I was like, this is awesome. You built awesome lives and careers for yourself. this doesn't change anything.
Yeah, this is like maybe even reinforced my other side.
Exactly. But she tried. Like, I gotta give my mom credit. She really pulled out all the stops to make me go back to the medical route.
That's so funny. That's awesome. So going back to Harvard and McKinsey, obviously these are elite organizations. What surprised you about entering like these organizations?
Yeah, I mean,
About
I
the
think
people and the culture and
yeah, dude. I mean, I think that we can sort of take them one by one. With Harvard, like, yes, Harvard's a big brand, but like so many of the people that I'm interacting with day after day, the people who are my friends to this day, like, it's like super humble, super kind, and like genuinely like good people who aren't there because it's like, oh man, like I'm like no one's like going around saying like, oh yeah, you know, I went to this school and like I'm like a Harvard kid or like that. I think there's some type of perception that there's a snootiness, and I mean, it can, like, there are definitely people who like have that, but like by and large, it's college. And I think that my college experience probably wasn't materially different from most people's college experiences. We just had access to some really cool opportunities and resources by virtue of the fact that we were Harvard. But I also think that the thing I feel really grateful about from Harvard is that Harvard, because it has such international pull, there's a lot of people from all over the world who are going there. And I feel like sort of going along with this theme of me broadening my horizons and really trying to figure out what was meaningful to me, I started to build like the opportunity to build friendships with people who, like, yes, they were going to school here, but then they went back to like Beijing or Istanbul or like Jakarta afterwards. But it's like, these are people who are so like close to my life. Like, it felt like for a guy who was like grew up in Iowa, where going to Boston felt like going to school in like Boston felt like a big leap. Having a truly international community of friends and people that I'm like really close to was just like amazing.
if you were to define the ratio of fear versus the love of creation as a driver for you and motivation, what would it be? Because I think fear can be a great motivator. I think the love of creation and creating can be a great motivator. How do you see that ratio for you? And how do you see it's evolved over time?
I think as we've so I think that the fear rate, the fear proportion has declined over time. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's largely shifted as we've the business has gotten more in place. It's picked up a certain momentum, and we're like, okay, this isn't about, we're not questioning whether anyone wants what we're doing anymore. But I think that initially the fear is the biggest driver. And I would actually say that what's interesting is it's actually not really a fear of failure per se, but rather because I grew up in a family where most people end up going into medical school, becoming doctors, and having stable, high-paying careers. There's actually, as the first person in my family who sort of made that leap really outside of that path, the real fear that I had to sort of juggle and I sort of wrestle with today is it's not about failure for me, but rather what it means to my family if everyone was pushing me to be a doctor and then I didn't do that, and then I just became and then I tried to be a business person, and that didn't go anywhere. And I feel like a lot of the way I sort of the chip I bring that I have on my shoulder is one of, I really, really, really want to prove to my family and all the people who've said why are you doing this? Why are you taking on that risk? That of course there's risk, but there's such amazing opportunity, and there's nothing stopping me or really anyone else in our family from going and doing this. And I think that it's honestly more about wanting to prove, it's not fear, but it's I want to prove them wrong. And I feel like that's interestingly the thing that probably motivates me most. I want to be the person in our family who did business really successfully. And I want to be able to point to the fact that it's you all said the only way to make it was as a doctor. Here's proof that that's not true. So
what does money mean to you? What's your relationship with money?
I'd be lying if I said it didn't matter, but it doesn't motivate me. Like, I think money is something that buys you time, or it's like you use money because I think it gets you time, or it gives you like the flexibility and choice to do what you want when you want. But like, I don't know, money in its own right, it's never really mattered that much. Like, I feel like like with my wife, she knows that like before, like I'm a huge Costco guy. Like I love like spending, like finding the cheapest thing or like in the most bulk, and like not necessarily like spending like on nice stuff. You know, I had a conversation with a founder who was like, yeah, you know, I have this dream car, and like every day I wake up and it's like I do what I do because I want to have that dream car. And it's like I thought about that, and it's like I don't know if there's a single thing that I want to buy that is like, this is why I do it. It's always been about like proving that I can do it, not necessarily the financial outcome sort of at the end of that.
And when you think about like ambition, and obviously you're an ambitious, driven person,
Yeah.
how do you think about the pull and push relationship with contentment?
Dude, this is you know, I remember in college having a conversation with some friends late night in the dining hall, and I remember saying, I don't know if I will ever be content, like ever, because like at that point in my life, I felt like I had all these dreams, all these ambitions, all these things I wanted to do, and it's like, you know, when you're in college, it's like it's like you haven't been given permission to do it. You're in this holding pattern, and then you graduate, and then you start doing. For me, so it's like that was my philosophy then. I think that as time has gone on, I've gotten married. My view on contentment has shifted, and I think that there's like contentment for me is there's a part of life at the home, having a loving spouse and being able to sort of like pour that love into someone and have a space that is just like safe, non-judgmental, and a place that I can just be without needing to prove or demonstrate value. That's a kind of contentment. But just because I have that at home doesn't mean I'm not extremely ambitious and I don't want to build a massive business. And I think that has been that's been the juggling act with contentment for me, that I have it in like, there's an aspect of my life where I feel so satiated, but there's this other thing where it's like, I want to keep on gunning. And I don't know if that business like drive to achieve and build is ever going to go away. But I feel like I've carved out a little piece of it where I can.
So we talked about, I mean, obviously you're somewhat of an enigma, an anomaly in this industry, coming from HubSpot, coming from Harvard, coming from McKinsey, kind of stumbling upon your way in multifamily. How's that transition been like, and what was that breakthrough process like?
Man, like it's been a challenge, candidly, because when we left HubSpot, we did not actually come up with this Propexo idea. We were originally building this effectively a consumer rent payment app. And we really had no idea about how rental housing as an industry worked. So it's like we come in, we're trying to build this rent payment app. It's not going well. And about 9 months in, I have a heart to heart with my co-founders, and we're like, we have to pivot. And I remember there was there's like literally a moment, June of 2022. I remember distinctly where it's like the rent payment app, it was not growing. And that sinking feeling in my stomach that I was like, holy shit, like this business is cooked, like, and we need to do something different. I remember like crying, like she was my fiance at that point, but my now wife, I remember like crying, like, and it's like crying, and she just held me. And then like in that moment, why was I crying? It was almost as if I was mourning the death of something. And like we hadn't formalized the pivot at that point, but I knew that business was dead. Even if we were still operating and doing stuff, it was dead. And the next few months was the path of finding something else that we could bring to life. And I think that like going through that experience, it made me all the more passionate and committed to like really finding something that was going to work, really finding a big problem for us to like go and tackle, and just like building something enduring. And I think that it was funny. My co-founders and I, we had this conversation about, hey, how like we need to. So like we have this meeting in July, and we're like, dude, by end of year, we have to find something by end of year. We have to have raised money by end of year, or we're all gonna walk. And like, we did it. We blitzed through a bunch of conversations with founders. We stumbled on this like pain around integrating with property management software. We started getting LOIs, and I think really the light bulb switched on for us when we got into Y Combinator, and it felt like wait. We went from a business that was like struggling, literally was generating like no dollars per month for like 9+ months. And then we get a bunch of LOIs, and the biggest startup accelerator program in the world says, this is a good idea. So it felt like, in this really compressed amount of time, we got this roller coaster of holy shit, like everything's going down. We got to turn it around. And then on the flip side, wow, like we haven't made it yet, but we've turned the ship around. Now we have to go and run at this opportunity that we found. But I think maybe going to your specific question about breaking into multifam, I knew nothing about the industry. And I think that what that meant was I had to sort of have the humility to try to learn as much as I can. And it was so painful. So many of the early meetings I had with people, they would ask us basic questions about integrations, and I just had no idea. But it's like every time they would ask us questions, I would try to research and make sure that if that question ever came up again, I would have like a really polished answer. And what I found was that after doing that for about a year, the balance of knowledge shifted. And in most conversations, I knew more about property management integrations than the other person that I was talking with. But it was an intentional process of learning, reading API docs as a non-technical person, talking with people who've done a lot more than me before I could build up real expertise.
That's funny. So and first of all, that's incredible. Like that's extremely, extremely challenging. We went through something similar, and it literally feels like you're taking this living, breathing organism that is 10,000 tons and is moving in one direction, and it takes all the force and rigor and vigor to turn this thing around and completely reinvent yourself in a space where your literal time clock of life is ticking and dying. So you have this like time clock on your life. You're running out of money. You have this ship that's massive that's moving one direction. You have to like rebuild it. So first of all, that's incredibly challenging and really inspirational for a lot of people, I bet, who may be even thinking about, do I make this decision? Am I working on the right thing? Is this business going to be the big business that I want to build?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, like the pivot, like if anything, I wish we had pivoted sooner. But you get, like, I think as a founder, you get so emotionally invested in what you found, and sometimes you will identify with the business in its current form, not necessarily the potential the business has to become. It can potentially become, and I think that for us, like it took us a while. It's like we were ignoring the signs for a bit, but it's like there was a point where it became obvious and inevitable. And just like when you stare that in the face, like you just have to accept the reality and just like, but you have to push through. And I think that I mean, you know this, right? When you get to those moments where your initial business doesn't work, you as founders can just give up. There's no one stopping you from saying, hey, you know what? Screw it. Like we gave it a good shake. The current thing isn't working. Let's just like pack it up and call it a day. But it's like pushing through. And I think that for me, I want to like give a huge shout out to my co-founders. We all committed to making this work. No one wanted to walk. And I think that like having people where it's like ride or die, we all are committed to making this work. It's invaluable. Like, I don't know, as much as I said, like we navigated this pivot, if it was me as a solo founder, I don't know if I would have been able to do it. I think having people around me where we're all in it together was absolutely vital for us to push through.
100%. I feel the same way, right? Like if I was in that alone, I think what a good co-founder does in those moments, like really, I think the co-founder dynamic is so important in these like make or break moments, because the thing that happens is you can make 10,000 to make a company successful. You're going to make 10,000 decisions, right?
Yeah.
To make a company fail, there's many decisions, but really the main decision is you give up and you stop.
Yeah.
And it's one decision. And having your co-founders there for you, and in some ways, if they're optimistic, positive, distorting your reality in a positive way is super, super valuable, because now you look at the world and you're like, oh yeah, like we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this.
Exactly. Like there's something about once again, everyone's emotional state, and like in the middle of the pivot, it's like some days are high, some days are low. But so long as like one person is like sort of the high, like you can sort of swap who's going to be the person bringing the energy and the enthusiasm. But it's like there's always someone to pull you up. And like it's just invaluable. It's so invaluable.
Totally. So what was we talked a little bit about it, but what was that idea maze like for you when you were trying to figure out what you were going to pivot into?
Yeah. So what we did was it was a bit of a top-down process. We had this brainstorming session in our co-working space where we went on a whiteboard, and we actually we first described the characteristics of a business we wanted to build. So our consumer rent payment app had a lot of weaknesses. The margins were absolutely garbage. The product itself was aggressively nice to have with a lot of substitutes. And we're also selling to consumers who are notoriously fickle, especially when it comes to like technology products. So what we decided was I remember we wrote on the whiteboard, 1, has to be B2B. 2, it has to be a must-have product core to a business, not like a nice-to-have like feature. And then 3, we're like, hey, we want minimum ACV to be like X $1,000 a month. So it's like we sort of walked backwards, say, what's the ideal business for us to build? And then we started coming up with ideas that we thought made a lot of sense. So one of the ideas I threw up on the board was literally Plaid for X. And I didn't know what X was. So it's like we liked that idea, and we started exploring that alongside a couple of others. But when we were trying to think about what the X could be, coming out, because we've been doing this rent payment app, one of the things we'd learned along the way was that every time we spoke to a property manager trying to get them to use our rent payment app, they would say like, yeah, your app is great, but does it integrate with AppFolio? Does it integrate with Yardi or RealPage or Entrata? So it's like we had this inkling that integration, like we want to do something Plaid-like. Property management software didn't seem to have a Plaid-like solution. So the next thing we did was started reaching out to founders in multifamily proptech, and like our email was super basic. We're like, hey, crazy idea. We're thinking about building Plaid for property management software. Would you mind telling us about your integration experience? First sign that we were onto something was, I think our cold email response rate was maybe like 40%. And we were booking maybe like a 15% meeting booked rate off of cold email, single email send. And then we got into those meetings, and every single person we talked to said, these integrations are a huge pain. It's like so expensive to build, so hard to maintain. The APIs are hard to work with. The support isn't really there. And it's like just the pain dumping we were getting in every conversation was like, holy crap, there's like something here. And this is also critical infrastructure. So it felt like we just like honed in on like the perfect problem. And we were just lucky enough that we had visibility into a particular market niche where this problem hadn't yet been solved.
That's so interesting. And I totally resonate with that. I think I was talking to Ani from RealLink yesterday, and when he was describing his process of building RealLink and finding product market fit, he said something that really sticks with me. He's like, product market fit should feel like a slap in the face. Like you should feel like customers are just vying for your product. They're screaming pain. And I think there's, in most things in life, like usually there's very strong micro signals that are very clear signals. And you don't need to do a bunch of research and things like that. You just, if you get these like short micro signals of like, this is painful, you know that it's going to, and YC talks about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I think that like there's this sometimes when you think about finding product market fit, it can sound like this like very dry intellectual exercise of run a bunch of interviews and have people say the same thing. For us, it was like hearing people's intonate when people talked about it. When I hear anger, when you consistently hear anger or fear or frustration, and like it's not even the words, but how they're saying it, you're like, that is the signal. Like when we did a rent payment app, no one felt strongly about what we were building. Everyone's like, yeah, cool. It's like, yeah, that's helpful. That would solve something for me. But when we start talking about integrations, like people would go off. And I think that like to your point, it's obvious when you find it, and when we saw it, it was very clear we were onto something. And it was a kind of signal we had not had on any of the other ideas that we'd explored.
That's awesome. Well, Remen, thank you so much for being here. This was incredible. We talked a lot about a lot of things, and I'm super excited for this to air.
Yeah, Shiv, this has been an absolute treat. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, man.